Hello, everybody. My name is Mark. This is Why I Hate the World. What's happening? So, I know that I didn't really give much notice for this, so hopefully my usual viewers will see that I'm streaming and will join shortly. Anyway, guys, I'm back. Didn't stream last week because I was at a convention, which was awesome. But today we're back, and we're going to be talking about the Supreme Court and some also I want to speak a little bit about Ohio and some recent things going on there because Ohio seems to be losing its mind. Before we start that, let's take a look at what we're working on. So here's our big piece that we've been doing for the last, 6 or 7 streams, adding some color to it. And I think it's turning out pretty good. I think it needs more colors, you know, but I don't want to make it like too colorful, too rainbowish, you know what I mean? But I don't know. But we'll see. I mean, it still has to look all weird and dead and rotten. So, before we get into all of this, I want to start a little bit with Lauren Boebert. So let me show you all a tweet that happened from Lauren Boebert because this, I think, is a good example of a very bad argument. So, recently we've had this rash of mass shootings, but in real life, it's just sort of been every single day in America we have these mass shootings. They've just had a couple of very high profile ones, in particular the one in Uvalde was pretty bad, you know, and that's still very much in the news, which is kind of surprising for these types of shootings. Usually, mass shootings will be in the news for a couple of days and then go away, right? People are still kind of talking about Uvalde. It's actually managed to get like that one, and then the Buffalo shooting that happened literally 10 days before, you know, started to kind of get a little bit of movement. Like people are actually talking about things like gun control and mass shootings, and maybe they're out of control. Maybe there's something we can do about it. And the right wing in this country is in damage control right now over this. They're kind of flipping their minds because the right wing is very much bought and sold by the gun lobby. And it's not just the gun lobby per se, it's also just conservative, like right wing conservative culture in the United States is very much taken over by basically gun loving sort of conservatives. They really, really love their guns, right? And it's sort of made its way into conservative culture. And so Republicans are basically kind of losing the narrative, which doesn't mean that they're going to actually capitulate and allow any meaningful like gun control to get passed on a federal level at least. That's not happening. There was a bill that passed in the Senate not that long ago, which is, I mean, in the House, which would do things like reduce the high capacity magazines and make it so you have to be 21 to buy a rifle, stuff like that. And it's going to the Senate to die. Nothing's going to pass. Nothing really is going to happen. Even right now in the Senate, they're debating gun control, and from the Republicans, they're just sort of clowning, because they have no intention of passing anything, and they're trying to shift blame away from the fact that crazy people are able to get guns extremely easy in this country, and they're blaming it on everything else. And if you've managed to watch any clips of those debates, they're blaming everything from violent video games to mental health to everything else, and so nothing's really going to happen. But that doesn't mean that they have not lost the narrative, because they have, and they know people are pissed. And if there's one good thing that could happen out of this, since we're not going to get any gun control, maybe a couple of these assholes will lose their elections over this. And then maybe next time we actually will have a Senate and a Congress that will, not be cowards and actually pass something. So this brings us to Lauren Boebert, because Lauren Boebert is, you know, in our government. She's in Congress. She's one of these people who will be voting on these laws. And I saw this tweet, well, not from her, but somebody tweeted a clip of something she said on Fox News. And I wanted to share this with you guys because, let me turn this on. Oh, wrong one. This is Lauren Boebert, right? Well, this is actually somebody else tweeting a clip of Lauren Boebert on Fox News. And let's see what she has to say about this, right? This is 13 seconds long. I think we can stomach this.
When 9/11 happened, we didn't ban planes. We secured the cockpit. And of course, leave it to Barack Obama to make this issue more divisive instead of allowing the nation to come together, mourn, and heal.
Well,
so first off, you notice right off the bat there, she pivoted and blamed a Democrat for this. Like, so that's one thing that politicians in particular, but usually conservatives will always do, is they always attack, 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 attack. Right. Barack Obama says a couple of things. We can come together. We have to do something about this, problem, blah, 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 blah. And the attack, of course, is he's making it more divisive. Right. It doesn't matter what Obama would have said. He could have said like the 100% conservative view on it. They still would have attacked him for being divisive. So whenever you hear that, whenever you hear he's being, they're making it more divisive, that means they don't have an argument. She doesn't have an argument. So the only thing that she can say is, "Oh, you're dividing the country." How? How the fuck is he divide? What did Barack Obama say that was so bad that's dividing the country? If she would have actually known that, she would have quoted him, right? She didn't quote him because she doesn't have an argument. So that's the first thing. So whenever you hear that coming out of a politician, you're making this more divisive. When everybody says, you're making this more divisive, that's basically a bullshit cop out right there. Secondly, let's turn this off because fuck Lauren Boebert, you dumb bitch. Secondly, the other thing she said, right, is the classic false equivalency that you get a lot from gun control types, right? You know, basically compared gun control to 9/11. We didn't outlaw planes, right? And you hear this a lot from various. It's a classic argument where when someone who doesn't like gun control is opposed to gun control will basically try to deflect by comparing guns to some other way in which people are killed in a massive way. And it's true. It's like you'll get people saying shit like well, terrorists in France ran people over with trucks, but we don't ban trucks, right? Or you could stab people to death, but we don't ban knives. Or you could poison people with cookies, but we don't ban Chips Ahoy, shit like that. Right. And here's the thing, it's a false equivalency because first off, planes and trucks and cookies are not the same thing as guns, right? They don't manufacture those things specifically to kill people, right? You can't sneak an airplane into a grade school and murder 18 children with it. That's the difference. That's the big difference there, right? It's not a weapon. It's something that's being used for its unintended purpose, right? Like an 18-year-old kid couldn't go buy a plane and then like crash it. You know what I mean? Like, and in order for it to be equivalent, that's what would have had to happen. The shooter in Uvalde, right, or the Buffalo shooter or whatever. Those guys would have had to have gone out, bought an airplane on their 18th birthday, took off and flown it into the building and killed those children that way. Then we can say it's equivalent. All right. So that's bullshit. And whenever anybody says that, that's the way that, that's the reasoning that they're saying. It's like, oh, these guns are blah blah blah, and it's the same thing. You could beat someone to death with a phone book. It's like, yeah, but you can't take a phone book into a fucking movie theater and shoot 24 people with it. You can't beat 24 people to death with a phone book. Right? It's bullshit. So, secondly, after 9/11, we did all kinds of stuff in order to prevent that from happening again. See, that's the other thing, right? Because the narrative that we're getting from the right wing here is that this is the price of freedom, that we have to put up with this, that there's no way to, nothing we can do about it. Just like that, like the Onion says, right? In our last stream that we did 2 weeks ago, nation where this tragedy repeatedly happens says that there's no way for it to for for it to be prevented or whatever the fuck it was. I can't remember exactly the name of the joke headline they had. Right. And that's simply fucking ridiculous. It's like, no, we don't have to, there are things we can do about it. Just like in 9/11, they did all kinds of shit to stop the same kind of terrorism again, right? I mean, try to get on an airplane now, you can't just walk in, right? Like it's you have to show up like 2 hours in advance. You have to go through security. You have to show all your paperwork. You can't get on a plane anymore without a fucking real ID, government issued real ID now, right? There's no fly lists to keep dangerous people off of airplanes, right? We have all kinds of stuff like that. You have to go through security. You have to take your shoes off. We created the TSA after 9/11 in order to stop terrorists from hijacking airplanes, right? We created like an entire security department that wasn't there before. Not to my knowledge. I know. Was the TSA there before 9/11? I don't think it was. And maybe it was. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Are we doing any of that for mass shooters? Do you have a list, a no purchase list, similar to a no fly list for mass shooters that this guy is not allowed to own a gun ever because, we've determined he's a risk? Does that exist? Right? Do you have to have in order to own a gun, do you have to have like hours and hours of training the same way that you do in order to fly an airplane? Right? No. So it's because it's bullshit. It's basically a false equivalency fallacy. There's a reason why it's called a fallacy. It's because it's fallacious thinking that's designed to distract from the argument and diminish the argument without actually attacking the merits of it. That's why it's a fallacy. That's why it's bullshit. So wanted to point that out there because that kind of stuck in my craw for a bit. Because it's one thing when you hear your random fucking douchebag on the internet use bad reasoning like that. All right, that's one thing. It's one thing if you're just like, in the YouTube comments or if you're arguing with somebody on Reddit or some shit and they say something stupid like that. It's another thing when it's a United States congressman, right? One of the people who are actually going to be making the laws, which will affect millions of people. She's going to basically be one of the people who will vote down any meaningful legislation which could potentially prevent another mass shooting or at least make it harder or at least reduce them to some event. She's going to be standing in the way of that because she's a goddamn moron. She's a goddamn idiot who thinks in a fallacious, because she can't think logically. Basically, mindful of fucking fallacies. It's ridiculous. Anyway, wanted to start off with that, Lauren Boebert, because fuck Lauren Boebert. Let's move on to our next segment here. Want to spend a few minutes talking about Ohio because certain things are going on in Ohio which are ridiculous. And I think we need to find out what the fuck is going on in Ohio. First thing, the Ohio House Republicans have voted to put Canada on a federal watch list. So, not going to open this up, but I'll put it down in the chat for you guys. Here's the link that I'm taking this from. Okay, actually, you know what? Let's open it. Let's open it up. Might as well. Oh, wrong one again. There we go. I'm just going to move that one down. There we go. Ohio House Republicans vote to put Canada on a federal watch list. Why? Why did they want to do this, right? Basically, long story short, in Canada, here we don't really need to read from this specifically. During the pandemic, Canada prevented large public gatherings, and included in those large public gatherings, of course, were churches. And Republicans in Ohio have decided that goes against people's human rights, that your right to gather in a building to fillet an imaginary sky god is outweighs your right to not catch a deadly disease and die horribly choking on your own fluid in your lungs. So they've decided that Canada must be evil, and they passed a resolution which urges the US Commission on International Religious Freedom to add Canada, right? To add Canada to a religious freedom watch list. Like Canada, because of the fact that Canada cares about public safety, that means that somehow you're not allowed to be a Christian there or some shit like that. Now, of course, this is just a resolution. It doesn't actually do anything. So whenever you hear this a lot, right? And even in the United States Congress, you'll see they pass a resolution to condemn Putin or something like that, right? Resolutions like this don't actually do anything. They're not established law. They don't actually carry any weight or punishment. You can't break a resolution and then get punished for it. Basically, what it's saying is we think that Canada is naughty. A resolution is a way of a legislature expressing an opinion, and it can be condemning or whatever. And it's essentially just bullshit to throw to your base to make it sound like you're doing something when you're not actually doing anything. Like you'll even hear this a lot, like in the Senate, for example. The Democrats propose a resolution in order to, condemn Trump for his latest Twitter tirade against, the Boy Scouts of America or some shit like that. You know what I mean? Like whoever Trump was fighting with that week. And it doesn't, resolutions are meaningless. And, but they do kind of show where the legislature is ideologically, right? Because it's a way of basically creating buzz without actually doing anything. So all of their constituents can stand up and be like, "See, they're fighting for our rights or whatever. They're fighting for our religious rights and all this other shit without actually having to actually pass anything or pass any laws or actually have a vote or whatever." So kind of just basically shows that in Ohio, the Republicans in Ohio are a little crazy where they think that they can punish an entire foreign country by themselves. That's the first thing because, Ohio is a state and everything. They don't really have much in the way of power when it comes to international relations between countries, right? Which is bullshit. And kind of just shows ideologically where they're at, that they're far, far, far right of center, which may explain some of these other crazy things that are going on in Ohio. So that was the first thing I wanted to bring up. Second thing is Ohio Bill 99, which just recently passed the Ohio State Senate and is on its way to be signed by the governor of Ohio, right? Which I don't have the actual governor's name here, but anyway, it's a Republican, I think, the governor of Ohio. Ohio Bill 99 allows for teachers to carry firearms in a classroom, which is the dumbest fucking idea of all time. It is incredibly stupid. And you know my opinion on this. I've talked about teachers carrying weapons many times in the past. It's fucking stupid as hell. It's gonna backfire. It's only a matter of time before either a teacher goes on their own shooting rampage or a student gets their hands on one of those weapons and goes on a sort of an impromptu school shooting rampage, right? Because think about it. Like, well, first off, let's talk about the actual bill, okay? What does this allow for? Ohio 99. Well, before this, if you wanted to carry a gun in Ohio on a school campus or something like that, if you wanted to be like, an employee, government employee that carried a gun, you had to have 700 hours of peace officer training, right, in order to be licensed to carry that weapon, right? That's kind of a lot, 700 hours. I mean, if you think 40 hours a week for like, that's like 30 weeks. So that's a good like what? How many months is that? Like what? 7 months of training, right? Kind of sounds about right. Kind of sounds what the police go through in order to actually, become a police officer and carry their guns, right? I think that's the least you could do. This particular law will now make it so that you could carry a gun after 24 hours of training. Now, not just one day, rather, like you get it and a day later you can carry a gun. That's actual 24 hours of training. So if you were to have, you know, a class that's 2 hours where you went and practiced shooting and gun safety and all that shit, you'd have to take 12 of those classes, right? So that significantly reduces the amount of training required in order to carry that gun, right? 24 hours down from 700. It's kind of a lot. And seeing how most people, even like some people, even with 700 hours of training, still end up shooting the wrong guy, right? You know, it's not like there aren't police shootings of unarmed people in Ohio. That happens all the fucking time too. So it's a recipe for disaster. And like I said, it's only a matter of time before a teacher goes nuts, starts shooting a bunch of people. It's only a matter of time before a kid steals the gun, starts shooting a bunch of people, right? So many things can go wrong, So that's the first thing. Second thing, it's like a teacher, how the fuck are they supposed to do this? Like how? Now, here's the thing, all right? I'm going to steel man this for a minute, and I'm going to take the best argument that I've heard for teachers having guns. All right. This is the best argument that I've heard ever for a teacher having a gun. And what they said is this: okay, well, the teacher doesn't have to be like trained up to like, SWAT team standard or whatever, right? All they have to do is barricade the kids in the room when there's a shooter, right? Stand with their gun pointed at the door, and if a guy tries to burst in through the door, shoot him. That's all they got to do. And I'm like, okay, that sounds logical, right? But you got to think about how many ways that can go wrong. You know, how many innocent people could get in the way because your average teacher is not a police officer. Your average teacher is like you know, I mean, fuck, right? Like older, sort of like middle age to even like senior citizen, right? Who is not trained on how to do all of this shit, right? They're just normal people and they may end up shooting the wrong person. They may end up, you know, doing something stupid, going out trying to stop the shooter themselves. They may end up, have everything barricade and then somebody opens the door and they fire and it's another teacher who was going there to tell them that everything's okay, right? Or they may end up being shot by the police. That's another thing. That myself, right, I think is the second biggest, dumbest fucking reason to not have teachers have guns. Okay. Because, the first reason, of course, being that the teacher is going to shoot the wrong fucking person, right? That's going to happen now. Just watch. That's going to happen in Ohio, right? The second reason is because now when the police actually go to the school, instead of one armed person, they now have, 40 armed people. and they don't know who's the one who's actually doing the shooting, right? So it's like the police are going to show up. They're going to see all these different armed teachers, and they're going to end up getting blown away too. Like they're going to end up shooting the teachers because the teachers have guns. That's what's going to happen. There's just so many ways that this can go wrong. And unfortunately, no one's going to, it's going to actually take a few people getting killed in order for this stupid shit to, like, you know, go away. It's a dumb idea, folks, right? It's a stupid fucking idea, and somebody in Ohio is going to pay for it. So, if you live in Ohio, if you have a kid and, you know, goes to school in Ohio, you better like you better train that kid. Hit the ground, run, you know. I don't know. I'd feel fucking scared as fuck if I had a child that went to school in Ohio. I'd be like, God damn. Imagine that. Imagine you piss off the wrong teacher and they just fucking flip out. And before you know it, that's going to happen. It will happen. There will be a mass shooting now that is going to be basically perpetrated by a teacher because they have a fucking gun there. And, like, the kids just kept fucking around and wouldn't shut up during the test, throwing spitwads and shit like that. There will be another one where a kid steals a gun and goes on a rampage. Just watch. Watch, it'll just be like somebody fucking, I don't know, dumbass idea. And it really does bring it home that the conservative pro Second Amendment people really do not have solutions when it comes to this stuff. Okay, last thing wrong with Ohio. And this one, I think people are really going to, yeah, this one is really bad. So there is a law that just passed, right? Um, Basically, it is House Bill 454, right? Which not only outlaws trans girls in sports and high school sports, but upon the accusation that a girl is trans, requires a genital inspection. So if you are a girl, teenage girl, and you're, like, say, on the volleyball team or something, and someone accuses you of being a trans girl, now you have to submit yourself to a genital inspection. Else you are now, if you don't go through that, if you say fuck that, I'm not doing that, I'm not taking my pants off so you can look at my junk, then you by law are forced to not play anymore. Now this has not been passed just yet, and that is to say it hasn't been signed into law, but it actually did pass the Ohio House 55 to 28 on the first day of Pride Month, by the way, which was not a coincidence, you know. They did that on purpose, of course, as a way of sending a message to their constituents, to the far right wing insane people who are losing their minds over this subject, just to show them how much they hate trans people. It was very much done on the first day of June on purpose like that. I have no doubt in my mind over that. Here's the thing about this, right? There is exactly one trans athlete in all of Ohio. One, right? So it's sort of like the Republicans are creating a problem and then passing something to solve the problem they created. Excuse me. And here's what really gets me about this, right? You know, we just had like this massive school shooting 2 weeks ago, right? Since then, there have been multiple other school shootings that we just haven't heard about. There have been multiple other mass shootings in general that we just haven't heard about because they happen every day in the country. So far, there's been something like more mass shootings now in the United States than there have been days. There's like literally two or three a day now, and we just don't hear about them because either not enough people die, right, which is ridiculous, or they don't, they just don't hit the news. I mean, if we did hear about every single mass shooting, it would just be constant, constant, constant mass shootings, right? But that's what's actually happening now in the country. So constant mass shootings, but the Republicans and the conservatives are stalling out on that. They're not allowing any meaningful legislation to pass, right? You get one transgender student that plays sports in the entire state of Ohio. One student out of 400,000 other transgender girls who play sports. They pass a fucking law. It gets passed. It's going to go before the fucking governor. That really stuck it to me there. That shows what do they really care about. They don't see that's the problem with Republic. They don't give a shit about. Not only do they not give a shit about you specifically, right? They don't really want to do anything about how things actually are right now. Like they don't even acknowledge the fact that any random dickhead can wake up in the morning, go buy a rifle, and by that afternoon be in a school killing children. They don't think that's a problem. If they thought it was a problem, they'd do something about it, right? They've shown that the shit they do think are problems, like girls playing sports, they think that's a problem. They're perfectly willing to do something about that. Perfectly willing to spend the time and the energy to pass a law for the shit they do care about, right? So they don't care about us. That's what you need to remember. They do not care. So when you see somebody like Lauren Boebert bringing this back around, making up bullshit about airplanes, it's because she doesn't care. She likes it like this. She likes the fact that children are getting blown away. She likes it. Okay. When you see Louis Gohmert or fucking, any of these other morons up there trying to like blame mass shootings on the fact that we don't allow, prayer in schools anymore or whatever, they don't care, right? They know what the problem is. They know it's a problem, right? They don't give a fuck. The lives of children do not matter to them. And this is what we need to remember because it doesn't make sense if you thought they actually gave a fuck, then their actions don't make sense. It only makes sense when you realize they don't actually care and they're just doing this because this is how they get reelected. And it's despicable. So take a look in Congress. The next time when you go to vote, if you haven't voted in the primaries later on this fall when you go to vote or whatever, right? Take a look at who actually is trying to do something about the actual problems in this country. Who actually has solutions? Who's not wasting their time with stupid bullshit, making dumb analogies, and then passing stuff to take away the rights of children? Look at who's actually trying to protect them and vote accordingly. Anyway, wanted to start with that. Right. We're at about 11:30. Don't really have any comments right now, so we'll just continue straight on. Maybe we might actually cut this stream a little short if we get through all the material. But let's move on to the main segment about the Supreme Court because the Supreme Court is broken in this country, right? So as you all know, we have currently uh, conservatives have a super majority on the court. So there is basically nothing stopping them from passing whatever they want to, well, not passing, but ruling however they want to rule, and whether that's overturning long established laws like Roe versus Wade. I mean, that's probably the most famous thing that they've attacked recently is Roe v. Wade, which is bad for many, many reasons. I mean, we won't focus on that because we did two streams on that already, right? And hopefully the blowback was enough to where, maybe it won't happen. But let's be real, folks, it's going to happen. Unfortunately, Roe v. Wade is going away, right? But Roe v. Wade is not the only court case. Excuse me for a second. Okay. Roe v. Wade, of course, is not the only court case, which is, before the Supreme Court. It's not the only bad decision that they've done recently. There's been a lot of pretty much everything since this latest iteration of the court came around is pretty fucking horrible. And I want to talk about a couple of more recent Supreme Court cases, which basically show that they are very busy taking away our rights, right? First one that just passed, or just this court, um, this opinion just came down a couple of days ago, is Egbert versus Bull, right? And I actually have let me just open this. I won't open this up here for to read or whatever, but let me just put this down in the thing. If you actually want to check out the decision on this, right? But this is Egbert versus Bull, and basically the summary is that Border Patrol officers and possibly all federal officers can no longer be sued for violating your Fourth Amendment rights. So, what does this mean, right? Well, you have qualified immunity when you're a police officer, right? What does that mean? That means if you are acting within the accordance of the law as a police officer, if you end up injuring someone, if you end up destroying property, whatever, as long as your actions are within the law, you cannot be held personally liable, right? And to some extent, we need that. We need qualified immunity as a country because, you know, if, for example, during the course of an investigation, someone ends up being innocent or whatever, then they can turn around and sue the police. And, what'll end up happening is that basically justice, the police will be, uh, let's say, police investigations, right? Will, I guess, what's the way to put this? Will disproportionately affect poor people if that's what would happen, right? So in one way, if you hold cops liable for something like say if they during the say they're searching your house and they break something, right? If you hold them personally liable for that, then that will sort of deter their like ability to investigate, you know, which in some, regret is like I think that's needed a little bit, but it's sort of like if they're doing it like the idea is that if they're not doing it in a lawful manner, then you should be able to sue them. And that's sort of what the established law was before this. So if a cop, say, for example, shakes you down, right, and, you know, violates your rights, then you were allowed to sue them before this, you know. In this particular case, what ended up happening was that it had to do with a border patrol agent that was like following a guy and pulled a guy over and it was Egbert, I think, right? That's the defendant or whatever. Pulls this guy over and goes through his papers and finds out that, because they were near the border of Canada or something, and finds out that everything was in order, but during the course of this, like, assaults him pretty badly, like, beats him up. Like, that's essentially what happened during this, threw him against a truck and then, like, on the ground and all this other stuff, and then took his papers out and found out that everything was in order. And then the same guy, what it was the, let's see, yeah, Bull was U.S. border. Wait, hang on. Was Bull the No, no, Bull is the defendant, and then Egbert was the U.S. Border Patrol agent, right? And that's what happened. So this guy Egbert basically violated Mr. Bull's rights. And what actually happened during the course of this investigation for Egbert versus Bull, what actually happened is that the Border Patrol agent then, after he like beats this guy up, finds out and he couldn't arrest him because everything was in order, right? Um, Bull then goes and lodges a complaint, right? So Egbert reports him to the IRS, right? As a as retribution, which is illegal. So not only did he beat the guy up, right, but he basically he reported his license plate to the Washington Department of Licensing for referencing illegal activity. Basically like put his license plate in and said, "Hey," told the cops to investigate him to see if there's anything wrong there, which is, you know, not legal. And then he turned over like he basically turned him over to the IRS in order to investigate him for tax fraud, which is also not legal because those are not things that were attached to his investigation. He's a border patrol guy. He's not supposed to be investigating people for tax fraud. He had no evidence that they had committed tax fraud or anything like that. And it was done out of retribution. And what happened is that, of course, the Border Patrol people decided not to do anything about that. They just, because that's what always happens when you lodge a complaint with the police of any kind, not just the Border Patrol, but any police, is that they don't really do shit about anything. They're not going to, the guy would have to kill somebody in order for them to be an investigation. And then, even then, there probably really wouldn't be much of an investigation unless the person who was killed was rich, right? That's just how it is in this country. So so you took him to court because that was the only recourse that Bull had here, the defendant had in this, right? After this fucking border patrol guy beat the crap out of him. Well, I don't know, beat the crap out of him, but assaulted him and then tried to use his position in order to ruin this dude's life by reporting him to the police and the IRS and shit like that as a form of retribution, which is illegal. You're not supposed to be allowed to do that. You're not allowed to use your position to exact revenge, to, vengeance on people like that. You're not allowed to do that, especially for when somebody like reports you for a fucking crime. Well, according to the Supreme Court now, that's completely legal. The Border Patrol guy has qualified immunity. And even though the things he did were not legal, the Supreme Court now says that's a-okay. Why? Because conservatives, that's why. That's the only reason why. Why did they side with someone, with the police here, with the Border Patrol people, when it's clearly not legal? It was clearly something that violated existing law. If you're a cop, right, and you do something like, say, you piss somebody off, you piss off you pull somebody over, whatever, and the guy gets mad at you and bitches you out or something like that, right? If you then say, go look up this person's address and find out where they work and stuff like that and refer them to the FBI for possible terrorism so that the FBI starts investigating. If you start doing shit like that, and then if you like refer them to the IRS for all these other things, and you don't have evidence that this person actually is involved in any of these illegal activities, that is supposed to be illegal. That's what this guy did, right? That's what this Border Patrol guy did. This is existing law says you're not allowed to do that. But according to the conservative, you know, ultra conservative Supreme Court that we have now, that's a-okay. So you do not, how do you now, if that were to happen, what do you do? Because this does happen, right? All the time. What do you do now in order to protect your rights? Your only recourse now is to file a complaint with the organization, with the institution that violated your rights. So the only recourse now, if say this Border Patrol guy were to do this today, that you would actually have in order to stop it would be to file a complaint with the Border Patrol people, which happened in this case, and they decided not to do anything about it. So basically, Border Patrol agents now can do whatever the hell they want. They can assault you, they can open investigations into you, and with like, revenge as a fucking motivating factor there. If you say something wrong to them, they can suddenly you find yourself being audited by the fucking, you know, IRS and shit, right? And you cannot do a goddamn thing about that. Our rights are significantly less now than they were before this, right? Why? Because this is what happens when conservatives are in charge. They take your rights away. People need to remember that. And these people are going to be in charge now for years until one of them drops dead, and then they'll still have a majority. So two of them are going to have to drop dead now before we can start putting this country back together. That's going to be what, 30 years? How old is Canova? What's his name? Brett Canova? How old is that guy? What is he in his 40s or something? We've got 30, 40 years of this shit to look forward to, folks. All right. Pretty fucking bad. There were two other recent cases which deal with qualified immunity, and the court sided with the police in both of those cases as well. One was Rivas Villegas versus Cortensuelo. What the hell? I'll just put this down in the chat. Cortes Luna. Cortes Luna. This is the name of the there down in the chat there. That's the actual name of the court case. And basically, long story short, that one was a domestic dispute. And what it was that there was a guy with a chainsaw. Basically, his name was Rivas Villegas, right? That guy had a chainsaw, was threatening his, domestic partner, I think his wife and child. They were boarded up in a room and he was like sawing some shit. And they were scared. They call the cops. Cops come and tell him to put the thing down. And he obeys. He completely obeys. He was like basically working in his house. His excuse is that I was just like doing handyman shit in my house. And he had a knife in his belt, like a utility knife. And so they said, "Put your hands up." So he puts his hands up, and then they said that he brought his hands back down. And so they shot him with a beanbag. And I guess he's lucky that they didn't kill him, right? He says that he did not put his hands down, but of course, one word over the other, right? So they shoot him with a beanbag and then they put him on the ground. And the cop puts his knee on the guy's back for a few seconds. It was something around 8 seconds, right? Which ended up causing him injury. Okay, because when you have a 200-pound man basically sitting on you like that after you've just been shot with a fucking beanbag in the stomach, he was shot in the stomach and the leg. So basically he was suing for police brutality, claiming that he was obeying their orders, right? Of course, they have body cam footage during all of this, but the audio on the body cam footage for significant portions of it cuts out for some reason. I don't know why that shit is allowed. You know, there's a reason why you have body cameras in the first place. It's so that we should be able to see what's happening, so that there's no doubt, right? Because if the police do follow the law and procedure like they always say they do, then the body cam footage should match up, right? There should be a goddamn law that says not only are you not allowed to turn these things off, right? It shouldn't even be within their control to turn them off. They should just be continuously streaming all day, right? But whatever. I mean, so not only should they not be able to turn them off, they should also not be able to take the sound out of it whenever they feel like it as well. This how many times you see that? Oh, here's the body cam footage, but there's no audio. Why'd they fucking remove the audio? Let us see what fucking happened. Does it match your story? Yes or no? Right? It's like fucking ridiculous. So anyway, he claims he was obeying their orders, and here's the reason why. You know why the audio was removed? Because he was obeying their orders. That's why. Because he did what they fucking said and they shot him anyway. Right. But I have no proof of that because I do not you know have the audio from the fucking footage. Anyway, that's besides the point. Point is that the Supreme Court, of course, have sided with the police and said that, oh, now they have qualified immunity, so cops are allowed to basically just fucking shoot you, alter the evidence of the encounter, present it how they want, and the Supreme Court says that's a-okay. Um, Another one, the city of Tahlequah, um, Oklahoma versus Bond. And what happened here was a guy, same kind of thing, handyman kind of dude working in his house, and the police are show up at his house and they're talking to him. They're just talking to him, which is you should never talk to the cops ever. If the cops come over and they go, we just want to talk, no, do not talk to the cops without a lawyer present ever. Even if you're not arrested, even if you didn't do anything, do not talk to the police. And this is why. This is exactly what happened. So they come over his house. They're questioning him. He's talking to him, and one thing leads to another. He walks over, picks up a hammer, and they end up shooting him. And there is no audio to this either. Large portions of the audio for this particular case are also missing. Right. The police claim that he just walked over, picked up a hammer, and looked like he was going to throw it, and then that's why they killed him. Right. That's what they say. His estate, Bond, that's the guy that was shot. His estate instead sued and said, well, the police had created a situation, right? And that's what the court case came down to. That's what this particular case came down to. The takeaway for City of Tahlequah, Oklahoma versus Bond is that if the cops through negligence create a situation, right, through recklessness and negligence that results in injury or death of a suspect, then according to the Supreme Court, they are still immune. You're not allowed to sue them, right? That was also not, you know, law up until this point. The whole point of qualified immunity is that they're supposed to be immune when they're obeying the law, when they're following procedure, right? When they, to their knowledge, are doing the right thing, then they should be immune. The Supreme Court just said, nope, they're immune even when they fuck up, even when they purposely don't follow the law, right? Even when they purposely, through their inaction, through their incompetence, create a situation in which someone's murdered or killed, right, or injured. You're not allowed to sue them. Basically, the Supreme Court's just saying you're not allowed to sue the cops at all for any reason. They're always they always have qualified immunity, and you know, basically means that they can just do whatever the fuck they want to you, and you have no recourse. Why? Because they are conservatives. Because conservatives, by their nature, are authoritarian, right? The conservatives, by their very nature, believe in hierarchies, right? They believe that certain people are superior to others by their very nature, and the ability of the higher class in order to force its will on the lower class relies on government power. And that's why the police are now allowed to do whatever the fuck they want, right? According to this current iteration of our Supreme Court with the super conservative majority, they can do whatever the fuck they want to. And anytime another case comes up, they're always going to side with the cops. It's broken, folks. Dynacat, hey! Addition to my birthday is Kamehameha Day. You mean, Kamehameha Day, is that like a Hawaiian holiday or something? Or does that have to do with like Dragon Ball Z? Well, anyway, happy birthday, Dynacat. Thank you for joining. Appreciate it. You know, um, I'll have to look up what Kamehameha Day is. I know that Kamehameha was a king of like Hawaii, right? So is that like his birthday or something, or is it like Hawaiian independence or something? I don't know. I'll look it up. But anyway, good to see you, man. Anyway, that brings us to um, let's see, Egbert versus Bull. That's one of the big Supreme Court cases I wanted to talk about here. Second one, Shim versus Ramirez. This is a pretty bad one that this just went through just the other day as well, right? The big takeaway for this, the summary for this, is that no new evidence can be presented in a federal court. So if you're serving time, right, and your court case has been escalated through the court system, it starts in the state court, goes all the way up through the state courts, goes to the state Supreme Court, whatever, ends up in a federal court, goes all the way up to the Supreme Court, whatever. Once you hit the federal court stage of your case, according to Shim versus Ramirez here, no new evidence can be introduced. So let's say that you are a death row, someone who's been on death row, right? And you've always maintained your innocence. And years have passed and you're going through appeals and you finally get a lawyer that the reason why your evidence of your um innocence was not introduced was because the public defender they gave you was incompetent, didn't give a shit, right? Didn't do his job or whatever. And so finally you manage to secure a decent lawyer who finds evidence that you are innocent of your crime. According to this Supreme Court case, you are not allowed to introduce that evidence because it was not introduced during the state proceedings. So if you've moved to the federal court system, you can only rely on evidence that was introduced during the state portion of your case. So innocent people are not allowed to present evidence that they're innocent, according to the Supreme Court. That's some background to this, okay? Because this one is not as simple as that. It's a little more, it's a little complicated, this particular case, and it started in 1996 with what's called the Anti-Terrorism and Effective Death Penalty Act. All right, so AEDPA, AEDPA, the acronym, right? And what that does is that it limits the arguments that a prisoner can raise and the evidence they can introduce in federal court or didn't, you know, based on what happened or what didn't happen during the state court, right? Which in and of itself is bullshit, if you ask me, right? But that was an actual law that was passed by Congress, okay? But since then, there were several other court cases which sort of opened up an avenue so that, you know, in certain ways you could introduce something, right? And this is just kind of how it should be because, damn it, that's blending the wrong way. You don't want people to be in court who are innocent who are unable to plead their case, right? Conceivably, right? If your court, if your court system is to have any justice in it, then there should be an avenue for someone who has evidence that they're innocent in order to get a new trial and display their evidence, you would think, right? So, that's kind of what happened over the course of the next few decades. And in 2012, there's another case called Martinez versus Ryan, and this also went before the Supreme Court, and it was a 7-2 majority where they ruled that there should be some way for prisoners in order to introduce this evidence. And what it is that in that specific case, it was prisoners who twice received ineffective representation. Right. Basically saying you had an incompetent lawyer who didn't introduce this evidence. Right. So if that happens twice, then you have another avenue. Now you can introduce this new evidence that you have found again. Like once you get a decent lawyer, right? Which happens all the time because here's the thing about this is that people lawyers are expensive as hell, and people rely on public defenders. Well, public defenders, you know, basically for the most part don't have the time and resources that a private lawyer has, right? Your public defender may be working on a dozen cases and is not going to go the extra mile for you many times, right? And so evidence that which may exonerate you may just not, they may just not, you know, introduce that because most of the time they don't really care. They're just sort of rubber stamping shit sometimes. Or maybe they're overworked. Maybe they don't have the ability to do it. Maybe they have, like I said, 12 cases that they have to try that week and shit falls through the cracks. That's just how it is in this, in this country. Things are not equal when it comes to our legal system, not by a fucking long shot, right? So this allowed that. This case, Martinez versus Ryan, allowed there to be some method by which you could appeal to the court and be like, I've got new evidence here. And you can introduce that into federal court, which I don't even know why the fuck that is not a law in the first place. Why that anti-terrorism thing? Like, what's the rationale behind that? It shouldn't matter what stage of the court system you're in. If there's new evidence, you should be able to present that at any time. I don't understand this, but I don't know. I'll have to look into why, like, that law was passed in the first place. Anyway, so now, what they did is that, without explicitly overruling the 2012 Martinez versus Ryan decision, they've upheld that pursuant to ADEPA, no new evidence can be introduced in federal court. This includes evidence which would be necessary to prove that the trial, um, you know, there should be a new trial because the, um, defendant's counsel was incompetent, like was ineffective, right? So basically, you can raise a claim. That now what this does, this new court decision says you can raise a claim, but you can't. You can claim that, hey, my lawyer was incompetent. I did not have adequate representation, right? And my evidence exonerating me was not introduced due to you know my incompetent representation, right? You can raise this claim, but you're not allowed to actually introduce the evidence itself, right? So it doesn't make any sense. So basically, that's the only recourse you have. You can go to the court, be like, hey, my lawyer that I had, right, was not like, it wasn't adequate. I didn't have adequate representation. He did not introduce evidence that I know exists, which exonerates me. But you're not allowed to say, here's the evidence that exonerates me. You're not allowed to actually say that. So what the fuck is the point? It basically closes that off, right? Closes off that entire. So now you're going to have, people who are in the court system now who are innocent And now they have no way of actually proving their innocence at all. There's no way that they can actually prove they're innocent. And even if the evidence comes to light that shows that they're innocent, they don't have any legal method in order to prove their innocence. Why? What's the point of that? Authoritarians. That's why. This is this is what fascism looks like, folks, right? This is actual fascism in practice right here. When you have evidence of your innocence and are not allowed to show that evidence, when the state is allowed to dictate, and hold people who have evidence so that they didn't commit any crime, doesn't fucking matter, you know? This is fascism. This is authoritarianism right there, right? I mean, I guess it's not fascism specifically. It's authoritarianism, right? Because conservatives are authoritarian by their very nature. People, we need to understand this, man. The same people who are sitting there screaming about freedom and all this other shit, and you know, because to them, freedom means the ability to buy a fucking AR-15 and kill 17 children with it. It doesn't mean equal representation in a court of law, right? They don't give a fuck about that because according to them, they're perfectly happy with all of that because it disproportionately affects poor people and minorities, people of color. They're perfectly happy to have the state crack down on those people. That's why. That's seriously the fucking reason, right? We could talk about it's racism. That's basically why. Why is the Supreme Court making all these decisions? Because these things disproportionately affect minorities. That's why. Kind of fucking ridiculous, folks, right? And we know all this because, I don't know. God, my fucking head hurts, man. Seriously. So this is just, within the last 6 months of the Supreme Court. Imagine what's going to happen over the next 40 years. It's a very scary thing. Really need to do something. I think if I were the Democrats, I would pack the court, is what I would do. There's no law that says there has to be 9 judges on the Supreme Court, you know. Um, and then didn't Roosevelt do this? Just started adding judges, and then until they got to like 12 or something like that, until they got a majority. I think this is what we should do. I think we should just start packing the court because fuck them, and the Republicans can scream and cry all they fucking want, but this is a desperate time. Desperate times call for desperate measures. So, and you wouldn't think, like, here's the thing about this, right? Is that these are normally the kinds of decisions that fly under the radar that people don't usually hear about, right? They're not as high profile as something like, say, Roe versus Wade. That's a super high profile thing that hits the news. Decisions like these that we just read here very much will be forgotten by next week. Very much so. And it just contributes to, the general sickness of first off, the general like unfairness and like, you know, injustice of our justice system, number one. But the main reason we don't hear about them so much is just specifically for what I said, is because they disproportionately affect minorities. They do, right? Who's more likely to have inadequate counsel? Poor people, right? Poor people, and by that extension, minorities, because minorities are usually tend to be poor, you know. Or rather, I'll put it a different way. The poor people in this country tend to be minorities. There you go, right? That's actually slightly different, slightly more nuanced than saying the other way, right? So no one's gonna give a shit because it only affects poor people, right? So rich people will have perfect fucking, like, they'll be able, the rich people can afford the best lawyers. That's why rich people never go to jail for anything in this country at all, unless it's like some celebrity that murders someone or whatever, right? Who is most likely to be roughed up by the cops in this country, right? Poor people and minorities, especially minorities. And in that case, we can say there is a direct correlation with racism, institutional racism, and the way that people are policed. There is. You're a white person, you're less likely to be arrested in the first place for committing a crime. You're less likely to go to jail for, committing a crime if you are arrested, right? You're more likely to get less jail time for the not just similar crimes, but the exact same crime if you're a white person. And there's lots of different reasons for that. Usually white, because white people can afford most of the time, they're usually better off. They can afford better lawyers. But not only that, there's an element of institutional racism in this completely. Anybody who denies that is on crack. There is institutional racism. Cops go easier on white people. They just do. And we've seen it even when it comes to things like fucking mass murderers. Dylan Roof, for example. Cops took him alive. They didn't just blow him away. And then they fucking took him to Burger King on when as they were driving him to the police station to get, processed or whatever. They stop and they get his ass fucking burger and fries. Would they do that if Dylan Roof was black? Hell no. Hell fucking no. Right? They probably wouldn't have taken him alive to begin. If you're a black person, they'll just shoot you in the back. Right? Like what was that guy? God, there was a dude. I can't remember his name. See, this shit happens so often. What the fuck was that guy's name that was shot in the back? Let's see. For let's see. Yeah, recently, just in April 19th, man who was shot in the back of the head. No, not him. It was Walter Scott, Patrick Laloya. Patrick Laloya was the man that was shot in the back of the head by a cop as they were wrestling on the ground. Right. Man shot in back car. It was no, this was a different story. It was Andrew Brown Jr. No, that's the guy that was shot as he was driving away from the police officer. Uh, Patrick Deloya. No, see, here's the thing. It happens so often that I can't even Google and find it. I can't remember his name. There was a case of a black man in his car, and he had a gun, and it was in his glove compartment, and he told the police that he had the gun, and what it was is that he had a permit to carry it, so they pull him over for a traffic stop or something. And he said yes. They asked him, "Do you have any weapons in the car?" And he said, "Yes, I do. I have a permit." And they fucking pull their guns and they shoot him, and he was shot in the back. And he didn't even have his gun on him or anything. It was like in the glove compartment. I can't see. That's the thing is it was a big deal, and now it's like these shootings happen so often that I try to Google it and I can't even find it. I'll have to look that up later. But anyway, shit like that happens all the time, and it's like that disproportionately affects minorities and people of color. Right. And that's why, that's my point. My point is this disproportionately affects these people. This is why we never hear about these things. This is why these court cases are not broadcast all over the news, right? They're not as famous as Roe versus Wade. People aren't going to like think about these. People don't think about this shit when they go to vote. And most people are not concerned when it comes to, say, the Supreme Court or whatever. Well, it's like you should be concerned. This is going to affect everybody, right? Don't think that just because you're like, you live in a nice area, right? And you don't, I'm not a criminal. I live in a nice place, whatever. Don't think that you might not ever get on the wrong side of the legal system because it can be something incredibly small, which kind of it's sort of like if you once you get involved in the legal system, you never get out of it ever. And it could be like the tiniest fucking thing. Like I had a friend years ago, right? Kind of time for a story. I had a friend years ago that her name was Joy, and she had this monster truck, right? And it had like these massively huge tires. I mean, they weren't anything like super gigantic, you know, like car crushing tires, but she had this huge truck and it had like really big ass tires on it. Thing probably got like fucking 6 miles a gallon or something. And she would get pulled over constantly for because her it stuck out. And that's the thing when you drive something that sticks out, you get pulled over. And it could be a red Ferrari, it doesn't matter. It's just something that draws attention. And if you draw attention, you get pulled over, right? And so she would have constantly be getting tickets over this and constantly fighting them and constantly having to go to court and all this other stuff, proving that it's like, no, these tires are legal because they were legal, right? And but she would constantly be getting tickets left and right, back and forth, all these other things, and then when you're going to court like fucking 8 times a year, that can like you end up missing it. So she would get fined and all these other things. And I think finally she just ditched the truck because it wasn't worth it, right? But it's just stuff like that. It's like once all it can take is something like a traffic ticket that you fail to show up at or something, and then you don't, pay it on time, and then a warrant gets put out for your arrest. And then before you know it, you're involved in the fucking legal system. Then you're paying for lawyers, and then you have fines and have all these fucking laws that maybe you don't know about or something. And it doesn't matter if you don't know the law, you're still subject to it, right? And you can basically, one thing can compound upon another. I'm just using traffic tickets as an example, but it could be anything, really. And your life can really get turned around in a very short amount of time because of the legal system in this country is fucked up and ridiculous, right? And it's like, this is why these things are important. It's important for us to pay attention and to who makes the laws, to what the people who are judging the laws right now are, to actually who makes the laws, to what the actually law, not just what the laws are, but like the fight over these things is very important. And it's something that gets ignored a lot in political discourse in this country. We only talk about the Supreme Court when huge big time profile cases come up, like cases like Roe versus Wade. That's the only time we talk about the Supreme Court, is that, or when it's like, you know, because people didn't. I mean, that's the thing. No one gave a shit. Like when, for example, Merrick Garland was denied his seat, nobody cared. You know what I mean? It wasn't that big of a deal. Why? Because no one could imagine that shit like this would be happening. Because people have a inherent trust in their institutions, especially in the United States. We're kind of trained through school. We're educated to believe that only the best people become Supreme Court justices, and only the best people become senators, and only the best people out there are making the laws. And it's simply not true. It's not true. You don't learn this in school here in this country. You don't learn that the people making the laws have agendas, and they're most of the time their agendas are very much in opposition of what's best for not just the country, but for you personally. So, anyway, that's pretty much it. I think we're gonna finish early today, folks. It's only 12:18. Got any comments? Dynacat, I cared. I cared as well. Yes, I did. Jeannie B, hey, good to hear from you. Our homegirl Apple used to get pulled over in the valley in her yellow Mercedes a lot, but it was mostly because they were perverts trying to get with her. Apple, I haven't seen her in forever. I think the last time I saw her was, God, me and you and Tamra hung out once, and then Apple was there. I think it was like, what, God, 2010 maybe? It was a while ago. It's true. It's true. I used to drive I had a kind of a piece of shit Ford Escort. Like it was my first car, And the reason that it was actually kind of, when I bought it, it was nice. And the reason why it was messed up is actually Aaron's fault. So Aaron is my brother, right? Who who is just very bad with cars, and he kind of destroyed my. He didn't really destroy the car, but like he took it out one day and then came back, and it was a this is like 20 years ago, so it had the to roll the windows up, it had little handles, and like the handle was broken off, and I'm like, what the hell is this? He's like, oh, sorry, it broke off. Then he brings it out again, and then comes back, and then all of the door handles were broken, like on every door. I'm like, dude, what you broke all the things? And then the cloth thing on the ceiling started coming off, and I eventually just gave that car to him, and he drove it like forever after that. But anyway, I used to drive this piece of shit around I lived in Camarillo, which is north of Los Angeles at the time, and it's a somewhat nicer suburb. It's not super rich. Camarillo is not super rich, but it's a nicer suburb, and I would get pulled over constantly, all the time, because I was driving this car, which obviously didn't fit there. you know, like everybody else is driving like Lexuses and shit like that, and I have this like '94 Ford Escort that's all fucking like the paint's all fucked up and you know, had like band stickers on it and shit like that. So I was constantly getting pulled over. But here's the thing is that I would get pulled over and then the cops would run my license plate and then they would just let me go. And it was like, okay, you can go. I'm like, really? All right. And this happens so many times. I can't even tell you how many times I get pulled over and just let go. So it makes me think that maybe there was somebody else with my name or something like that had the same name as me or something that they were looking for, or you know, I don't know. But anyway, that was anyway. What else we got? Hope you enjoyed the con, buddy. Yes. Um, it was great. I was at Monster Palooza in Pasadena this past weekend, which if any of you guys are ever out on the West Coast at around this time, it's sort of like a horror convention. And the cool thing about it is it's like a lot of industry professionals show up there. So I mean, I'm there with the table like just selling artwork and stuff. But then right over there there'll be like a booth from like Stan Winston Studios with like state of the art makeup effects and stuff like that, and it was like so that's really cool to see that. And the costumes at this one are like beyond crazy. So they have a they I don't know if they did it this time, but in the past they've had costume contests where like the main prize is like $10,000 and stuff. So it's like the people that enter are usually Hollywood professionals, you know. And just to see you get to see all these like incredible like crazy ass like horror costumes walking around, people walking around with like really insane stuff. And one of these days I'll have to show some pictures of these places cuz like they're like you see cosplay on the internet and usually go, oh, that's really good, blah blah blah. Like these are on like a whole nother level. Like I'm not even kidding. It's like shit you would see in a movie. So pretty cool stuff. And then they have that, and of course they have the usual con things and prints and guys selling bootleg DVDs and stuff like that. But this one in particular is really awesome. So if anybody ever gets a chance to go check that out, there's another one in October called Son of Monster Palooza, which is in Burbank, and I'm gonna be there as well. So I'll let everybody know. Any of my fans live out in California to come visit me and stuff. I'll be there for sure. Next con I'm gonna be doing is called Power Morphicon, which is also in Pasadena, which is sort of like it's actually a Power Rangers kind of thing. So that's where I'll be there also in August. I'll be at that one. So anyway, one more comment. Genie B, fun fact about the streamer, his bedroom was covered in cool as local band flyers. Yeah, that was back in the day at my old house. I covered like every square inch of the walls with stuff. You know what though? I wouldn't do that again because when we moved, the walls were totally like destroyed. with just like tape everywhere. Like they basically had to be like sanded and repainted, but we just left. We just left that forever, bought the house. Anyway, guys, I think maybe today we'll cut it a little short. Yeah, about an hour and a half. That's not too bad. But that's really what I wanted to go through, today. I wanted to just sort of share these things because, yeah, like I was saying before, we don't pay attention to the Supreme Court. We don't, and not just us, I mean, as like a nation, you know what I mean? We really don't they're not ever really in the news unless it's something super, super high profile. And it's like, no, these little court cases, they matter, like these things matter, like, because it's sort of like a degradation of our court system, of our justice system. The justice system was never really fair in the first place, right? A lot of the rights that people think they have don't actually come from any law, but they actually come from court cases. So something like segregation, right? There was no law that actually outlawed segregation you know, until the Civil Rights Act, right? But before that, it was an actual court case. It was Brown versus Board of Education, which ended segregation, and that didn't happen until like what, 1958, I think, right? Segregation itself was established in another court case in 1896. It was Plessy versus Ferguson. You know, that's one that y'all remember from, ninth grade, ninth grade social studies, right? Plessy versus Ferguson basically established the what you call separate but equal clause. So basically, you opened the door for segregation. And in that case, it was train cars. What that original case was about was that you know um, basically a train company wanted to have segregated train cars, and then somebody sued, and the Supreme Court said, well, it's okay as long as the facilities offered to each race are equal. They can be separate. And so that was a Supreme Court case which basically opened the door for segregation in the first place. And it wasn't for another 60, close to 70 years after that, that that ruling was overturned in I think it was 1958, that said separate but equal was not, constitutional, but only when applied to education. And that's where you get those old videos. Like if you've ever seen, the old videos where little black children are going to school you know, and like there's like all these white people outside with signs and shit protesting it, and like the fucking in Alabama and stuff, and the governor brings in like the National Guard in order to like protect these kids so that they can actually go to school and all that. Like that's where that's why that happened, because of, and segregation was finally on the way to being outlawed. And it was the actual it didn't actually get like outlawed all the way until the Equal Rights Act, right? But a Supreme Court case opened the door for that. Another one, 1963, it was Gideon versus Wainwright, right? That's the famous case that guaranteed everybody to have a right to a lawyer. See, in the Sixth Amendment, right? And that's the thing, is that you would go, well, the Sixth Amendment says you're supposed to have a right to a lawyer, right? Yeah, it does. But before this, 1963, before this court case, you were not guaranteed a right to a lawyer. Like especially in state cases. In state cases, they didn't have to give you one, right? It was like certain federal cases, yes, but state cases, no. And what ended up happening, it was in that particular case, it was like a guy who was accused of breaking into a restaurant and breaking into a cigarette vending machine, right? And because it was like a multiple offense for him. Like the same dude, he was like some old dude, and he had a couple of priors, and because he had like a record, they decided to give him life in prison for that, for like breaking into a restaurant and stealing like 350 and change out of a cigarette machine or something. Gets life in prison, and he didn't have a lawyer, and he sued and got it up before the Supreme Court, and then because of that case, even if you're super poor, you still at least get a public defender, which is still inadequate in many of the cases. I mean, that was one we were just discussing, right? Before this, right? But I mean, just think about that. And that's a constitutional right. It's in the Constitution. Your Sixth Amendment, right to, and that was not being applied before the Supreme Court case, right? Loving versus Virginia, 1967. This is the court case that got rid of misogynation, or how do you miscegenation law? Am I pronouncing that right? Basically, the law that outlawed, interracial marriage, right? That's overturned to that misogynation. Am I pronouncing that right? How do you fucking pronounce that? Hang on. You guys all know that I am like barely literate, so no, I'm just kidding. Pronounce OUNC. Miscegenation. That's how you pronounce that. Okay, fucking. Anyway, sorry, I'm tired. But before that, yeah, before this Loving versus Virginia, before this court case, right? A state could pass a law basically saying that you're not allowed to marry somebody who's a different race than you, right? And this is basically what happened. It was a guy name was his Richard Loving. He was white, and his wife was named Mildred Loving. She was black. And they both got a year in prison for the crime of getting married. Can you imagine that today? Going to fucking jail for marrying somebody who's not like the same like skin color as you, right? That's 1967. That's not that long ago. That's within the lifetime of my mother. I mean, fuck. That's only, geez, 10 years before I was born myself, roughly. About 10 years. Not that long ago, folks. So you think, oh, this is like ancient history and shit. It's not. It's within the lifetime of many of the people who are not just still alive, but who are actually in Congress making laws and shit right now. Right? Yeah, that's the thing to think about. Nancy Pelosi and fucking Chuck Schumer and like, Mitch McConnell, all those people grew up during this era where it was illegal to get married to someone who wasn't the same color as you, right? Why do we think that that'll never come back? Why do we think that they'll never be brazen enough to try to bring that back? Of course they fucking will. Of course they'll try to, right? It's on I mean, shit, if they'll overturn abortion, if they'll overturn Roe versus Wade, what else are they going to fucking overturn, right? Obviously, they don't give a shit about causing social strife. They don't care about precedent. That's all like bullshit. So, another one is Obergefell versus Hodges. This is the decision that allowed same-sex marriage because there was no law that said that same-sex marriage was allowed. And in fact, in the 90s, Bill Clinton signed a law that basically outlawed gay marriage. That was from a Democrat, right? The Protect Marriage Sanctity of Marriage Act or whatever the fuck it was called. Protect Marriage Act, some bullshit like that. Bill Clinton fucking signed that, right? It took a court case that goes before the Supreme Court to say that that is unconstitutional. And it didn't happen until 20 years later, right? Who's to say that won't get overturned also? Even the ability for gay people to love each other and be in relationships and have a sexual relationship with each other, even that was something that was decided by a court case. It was Lawrence versus Texas. which outlawed sodomy laws in Texas. Because that's another thing people don't, we never grew up with any of this. Of course, these are the kind of laws that weren't really enforced in the first place, not by the time that, recently. This was in 1986 that this was overturned. It's not like there were people being thrown in prison for sodomy or whatever very often, but it was a law on the books that at one time you could go to prison for having gay sex, for having sex with someone who was the same, you know, um, someone who was the same biological sex as you. You could go to prison for that. That's kind of unimaginable today, right? But it happened, and it was a Supreme Court case which overturned it. So it's the Supreme Court is important. It's extremely important. It's extremely important who decides what our laws, what laws are and are not allowed to be enacted and how they're interpreted in this country. And right now, the people in charge of that are just fucking taking shit away from us. A lot of our rights. These are rights that people think they have. You know, they're not actually rights. They're if they hinge on a Supreme Court decision, it's not a right. It's like a temporary privilege. And so, I mean, on the one hand, we could focus on, how do you fix this, right? You fix this through voting. You fix this through voting in people who will codify these supposed rights into law so that they become actual rights. Why do we not have an actual law that says, you know, all of these things, right? Why do we not have it? That's how you stop it. Because you pass a law that says the Supreme Court, then the Supreme Court goes, okay, well, according to this law, this is what it says, and that's how you get around this shit, you know. And that's why it matters. It matters who's in charge. It matters who you vote for. Fucking matters for this specific reason. So, anyway, guys, okay, I think that's it. We're ending a little bit early, but that's okay. It's 12:36. Thank you all, everybody, for coming. I really appreciate it. You guys are great. Thank you, Dynacat. Thank you, Adversary Fandon. And thank you, Genie B. Awesome to see you. Please like and subscribe if you have not already. I know it's dumb to say that, but kind of got to say it because whenever I do say it, people actually do it. So please like and subscribe. And if you like what I do and you want to support me, let me just open up all my stuff here. There we go, Ansley.com, blah, blah, blah. Let me just go to my shop manager. Hang on, sorry guys, I'm just getting ready for my ending stuff. Let's see, open up that. And UCD videos, there we go. So if you like what I do and you want to support me, please go to my SD shop and buy something. I have lots of prints and comics and stuff like that. So I'll put all this stuff. I'll put links to all this stuff in the after the video publishes. I'll put it down there. Anyway, if you like what I do and you want to support me and you want to give me money, please consider buying something from my SD shop. You can check me out on my DeviantArt profile here. I have different all my artwork that I do here shows up on the DeviantArt site. Here's one that I just did recently, big evil succubus demon thing. So please check me out there. Got a web comic. It has talking ducks. It has people getting punched in the face, stuff like that. It has ninjas. Check me out at holanja.com. And I have another YouTube channel called UCD Videos where I do toy reviews and crap. I actually made a new video not that long ago. So I've been ignoring this for like a long time and I'm going to start it up back again. So please check me out if you want to see me talk about toys and video games and that kind of thing. Anyway, you guys are great. Thank you all so much for coming. And I will see you all probably Wednesday. I'm gonna try to do 2 streams a week, but for sure this one every Saturday, except when I have like stuff to do out of town, I will be here. So for sure next Saturday at 11 a.m. Pacific. Um, and everybody else, see you later.